Hi, this is Fawn, and I am the writer behind Least Restrictive Learning. Today's topic is parts of the IEP. The IEP meeting can be mysterious and daunting for parents. One way to approach it is to ensure you know what is included in the IEP and what topics need to be covered. The U.S. Department of Education requires 9 things to be included in every IEP. Some states may add additional sections, and every school district may use a different template, but they all must include these 9 items required at the national level. Whether preparing for your first IEP or your 50th, it's a good idea to come prepared to keep the meeting focused and keep it moving along. The longest IEP meeting I have attended was 4.5 hours. But it is common to have a meeting scheduled for 1 to 2 hours, and team members may be unable to continue the meeting if it goes past the scheduled time. Coming prepared can help get everything done during the meeting time. Let's start with all of the IEP sections, and I'm going to give a quick overview of each one. Parts of the IEP, list and short explanation. The U.S. Department of Education has set 9 items that must be included at the federal level. States will have additional requirements, but these are what must be included nationwide. Present levels. This means where the student is currently. Annual goals. Academic goals and goals from related services section, which will be reviewed each year. Special education and related services. This section states what specially designed instruction and related services, such as speech therapy, will be delivered and how often they will be delivered. Participation with non-disabled children. The IEP must state how much the student will participate with non-disabled children and review the least restrictive environment. Testing. This section will state whether the student will participate in state testing and what accommodations will be made for testing. Dates and places. Every IEP will state when services start, when the IEP needs to be reviewed, and where the services will be provided. Transition. By the time a child is 14, sometimes earlier depending on the state, a statement of transition for post-high school must be included, and the team must address what courses the student needs for success after graduation. Age of majority. By the age of 16 or earlier in some states, the IEP must state what services are needed to prepare the student to transition from high school into adulthood. Measuring progress. It must be stated how progress will be measured and how the parents will be informed. In addition to the required sections, there are a few optional sections, although they may be required in some states. Sometimes the parent must insist that it is covered or submit a request. Parent statement. This section can be added to let parents write what they want about the child and services received. They can put down the present levels they see outside of school, things they want to work on, and goals they have. The most important part of this section is that parents may write anything they disagree with in the rest of the IEP. Prior written notice. If a parent disagrees with a decision by the team, they may request prior written notice, which is an explanation of what was decided, why it was decided, and what other options were considered. 1-page profile. A parent may submit a 1-page profile to be included in the IEP that briefly covers what is important to the student and how to support them best. Now we'll go through each of the sections that I just mentioned and define them just a little. Present levels. The present level section may be one of the longest sections. Some teams will leave the past levels and add new ones each year, with the year added for clarity. You will find that this section takes up much of the time of the meeting. This is where you will discuss everything happening, how well the services are working, and other things going on in the student's life. The IEP will have a robust present level section as it includes all the testing done to qualify the student for an IEP. Things that you can expect to be included in this section are psychologist reports, IEP qualifications, academic grades, academic testing, other academic information, current services, current levels from all current services, classroom behaviors, home behaviors, speech therapy, occupational therapy, autism therapy, how the assistive technology, if any, is working, how accommodations and modifications are working at school, and anything else that is going on with the student that is relevant to be discussed within this section. Next, we have annual goals. Every IEP must include goals. This is the meat of the IEP and directs the team on navigating what the student needs throughout the year. Every goal should be written for the length of the IEP. This usually means each grade level, but it could mean as long as 3 years if the 3-year exception has been implemented. Goals should be written so they can be accomplished within 1 year in most cases. If you find that goals are not changing, address this with the team and see what services might be added or what changes should be considered to help the student progress academically or in the area that the goal addresses. Sometimes the goal doesn't change because it is too broad and something the student will work on throughout their life. I'd encourage you to have the team break that down into different goals that can be completed, or whether the expectation is inappropriate for the student. If the goal is academic and the student doesn't progress year over year, it may be important to dig into this and encourage the school to adjust the goal or services, because all students should progress academically whether or not they are on an IEP. If they are not progressing academically, it is vital to dig into why. Even if it takes a student several years to progress through a typical grade level, the goals should reflect the different parts of the curriculum they are moving through. Goals should be written like SMART goals, which stands for specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time sensitive. The next section is special education and related services. Special education, or specially designed instruction, separates the IEP from the 504 plan. Students must require special education to qualify for an IEP. This does not mean students must be delayed academically or get poor grades to qualify for an IEP. For example, a student may have excellent reading skills but needs speech therapy to address figurative language understanding. It is common for students with disabilities to have uneven skills, even within a subject. They may be excellent at geometry, but algebraic calculations may elude them. Some related services included in this section may be speech therapy, occupational therapy, autism therapy, behavioral therapy, Braille, or other things a student may need in addition to classroom instruction. Any related services should have goals in the proper section. The next section is participation with non-disabled children. The IEP must specifically state the extent to which the disabled student will participate with non-disabled students. Least restrictive environment is the key term in this section. If you would like a refresher or a list of questions to determine whether a student is in the least restrictive environment, I did write an article on this topic, and I will go ahead and link that down below. The law states that students must be educated in the least restrictive environment. So, quoting directly from the law, it says, to the maximum extent appropriate, children with disabilities, including children in public or private institutions or other care facilities, are educated with children who are not disabled. This part of the law is why this section about participation with non-disabled children must be included in the IEP. Since the law states that they must be with students who are not disabled for as much time as possible, it must be stated how much time, if any, they spend outside the general education classroom and why. This section is vital, and it is one of the places I lacked understanding going into my first IEP meetings. Many schools prefer to separate children with disabilities because it makes it easier for them. The key question is, what could be done for this student that would allow them to be in the general education classroom? If the student needs an aid that goes with them to class to meet this, then the school is obligated to provide it. Sometimes the school must be convinced, but the law is clear on the requirement. The next section is Testing. Standardized testing is part of the public school system, and the IEP must state the student's needs to participate in this testing. This section does not usually state that they will not participate. Parents can opt students out of testing independently. The testing section on the IEP states what accommodations or modifications are needed to participate in testing. They may need to have the level of the test adjusted for them or have services during testing. Common testing accommodations include additional time, quiet testing space, visual aids, speech to text, changing academic levels, pacing assistance, behavioral assistance, fidgets, or chewies. Not all accommodations are needed or appropriate for all sections. For example, a student may have an accommodation to use a calculator in some sections, but it would be inappropriate to use it in other sections. The next IEP section we have is dates and places. There are 4 important parts in this section. 1. Date services will start. 2. How often services will be provided. 3. Length of services, which is also the date by which a new IEP is due. 4. Location services will be provided. Most of this section is fairly easy to understand. The date services start need to be as soon as possible after the IEP if it is new. If it is a continuation, there shouldn't be a lapse in services. Services are usually written in minutes. The length will vary. Having them listed per month or year is typical. Regular services like speech therapy will likely be listed monthly. Less regular services based on observing the class are typically listed yearly. So for example, you might see 240 minutes per month, which is about an hour a week. The next section of the IEP is transition. On the IEP, transition refers to the transition between high school and adult life. The transition section must be filled out by the time the child is 14 years old, but it may be earlier in your state. It must address what the student wishes to do after high school and consider what academic courses they need to be successful in their pursuits. Transition must also include what transition services are needed to prepare the student for life after high school. The next IEP section is the age of majority. Like the transition section, the age of majority refers to preparing students for life after high school. Students must be told about the transition from high school and included in their own IEP. The age by which they must participate depends on the state, but they need to be included by the time they are 16. Measuring progress. This is usually included within the goals section, but may be in a separate section specifically. The IEP must address how academic progress on their goals will be measured. If they need accommodations or modifications, it needs to be addressed how progress will be monitored within that need. This section must also address how the parents will be informed about progress towards goals. This is usually given to parents quarterly if your school has quarters. The next IEP section is our parent statement. So this is where we are headed into the non-required sections. Parent statement. The parent statement section isn't an official section in most states. However, parents are always allowed to write a parent statement. A parent statement is for when you want to add information to the IEP that the other team members may not agree with. This might be regarding a decision you don't agree with, or information you would like to add for context. One of the ways to phrase this is, we are concerned because, putting in the student's strength, isn't being utilized for student's area of improvement, because, and state your reason. For example, we are concerned because N's strength in typing isn't being utilized for writing because they can express themselves more fluently when typing than writing by hand. I would caution against using this section to air any grievances with team members you disagree with. Focus on the strengths and the needs of the student. Our next IEP section is prior written notice. This one's not so much a section as something that you can request at any time. Prior written notice is underutilized, and most parents remain unaware of this parental right. When you disagree with a decision made, or want to have an official record of a decision and the reasoning behind the decision by the administration, parents may request prior written notice be done. Prior written notice is also abbreviated PWN. The admin must write what option was presented, the considerations the team made, other options the team considered, and why the decision was made and how that decision best impacts the student. Having a written record inside the IEP can be extremely helpful if a new school is reading the IEP or any situation where someone wants to understand the thought process behind a decision. For example, a prior written notice could be requested if a student was denied the assistive technology being selected because the school provides a computer for all students. It would be helpful in a situation where all students weren't offered a computer, but the students still needed it as part of their IEP. Another reason is to get a written record of denial of services. This may be helpful if you're considering legal action. Due to the time it takes and the record it makes, sometimes the admin will agree to try the other option the parent presented. The last IEP section we're going to discuss today is the one-page profile. Of all the extra parts of the IEP that aren't specifically mentioned, the one-page profile is the one that the admin openly welcomes. I highly recommend doing a one-page profile every year due to how helpful they are in the IEP meeting and during their year at school. A one-page profile has a photo of the student and important information. It is done on one page for easy reference for any teacher or staff interacting with your child. And I have written an article on how to create a one-page profile, and I'll go ahead and link that below in the description. And that is the end to our sections of the IEP. I hope it was helpful to go over all the different sections of the IEP to see what things you may want to consider when you are planning for your next IEP. If you have any questions or suggestions for other videos, go ahead and leave a comment below, and we'll see you next time. Have a great one, guys.